The late afternoon sun stretched long, golden fingers across the quiet neighborhood of Lake Forest, Illinois, as Ethan Hale guided his sleek black SUV into the driveway of his estate. The gravel crunched under the tires, each sound amplified by the stillness of the early evening. He hadn't planned to be home this soon. The deal-closing trip to Manhattan had ended hours ahead of schedule, and instead of dinner at a restaurant in Midtown, he'd taken the first flight back to Chicago. A part of him told himself it was for efficiency, but deep down, he knew he just wanted to see Aiden. As he stepped inside the house, the familiar scent of polished wood and fresh linen greeted him, but there was something else, something different. The air hummed faintly, vibrating with sound. Ethan paused in the grand entryway, frowning. Music, not the thumping bass of Aiden's favorite playlists, but something smooth, elegant, a waltz. The kind of music that belonged in a ballroom in Vienna, not in a quiet suburban home outside Chicago. He set his leather briefcase silently on the console table and followed the sound down the long hallway. Each step felt strangely louder than usual, as though the house itself was urging him to move carefully. The melody swelled as he passed the formal dining room, then the library, until he reached the double doors of the ballroom, a room they almost never used, a relic from when the house had been built for hosting lavish parties. The doors were slightly ajar, and warm golden light spilled out onto the hallway rug. Ethan hesitated, his hand hovering near the handle. A strange mix of emotions stirred in his chest. Curiosity, protectiveness, a sense of trespassing on something private. Slowly, he pushed the door open. What he saw made him stop cold. There, in the middle of the polished oak floor, was Aiden, dressed in a light blue button-down shirt that Ethan didn't remember picking out for him. His small hand rested carefully on the waist of Sofia Benedetti, the young housekeeper who had started working for them just a few months ago. They were dancing, not swaying, not shuffling, but truly dancing a waltz, each step perfectly timed with the music. Sofia's movements were mesmerizing. She wasn't simply guiding Aiden, she was leading him with the grace of a professional, her chin lifted, her back impossibly straight, her hand gestures precise. The sunlight pouring through the tall windows caught the soft waves of her dark hair as she spun gracefully. And Aiden, Ethan's quiet, reserved son, was laughing. Laughing in a way Ethan hadn't heard since before Claire passed away. Ethan stood frozen in the doorway, the scene unfolding before him like something out of a movie. For a moment, he didn't want to move, didn't want to break whatever spell had been cast in this room. The music swirled, the light bathed everything in gold, and he realized with a strange ache in his chest that this was the first time in months he had seen his son look truly, deeply happy. The creak of the door echoed softly through the ballroom as Ethan stepped inside, and just like that, the spell shattered. The music still played, but it felt suddenly fragile, as though one wrong move could silence it. Sofia froze mid-turn, her elegant hand still guiding Aiden's. For a fraction of a second, she looked like someone caught trespassing, wide-eyed, breath held, before quickly letting go of the boy and stepping back. Aiden's reaction was the opposite. His entire face lit up like a lamp being switched on. "Dad!" he cried, his voice bouncing off the high ceiling. His small shoes clacked against the oak floor as he ran full speed across the room. Ethan bent down instinctively, catching his son in his arms and lifting him into a quick hug. "You're home," Aiden said breathlessly. "You weren't supposed to be home until tomorrow." "I wrapped up early," Ethan said, forcing a warm smile as he set his son back on the floor. "I thought I'd surprise you." His voice sounded casual, but his gaze was already on Sofia. She stood near the center of the ballroom, suddenly small against the expanse of the room. Her usual confident posture was gone, replaced by a stiffness that made her look almost like a statue. Her hands were clasped in front of her, as if bracing for judgment. "I didn't mean to interrupt," Ethan said after a beat, his tone deliberately light but edged with curiosity. He stepped farther into the room, his polished shoes whispering against the floor. I didn't know we were hosting dance lessons in here. A faint pink rose in Sofia's cheeks. It's nothing formal, she said, her voice quieter than usual. Aidan saw me practicing once, and he asked me to show him a few steps. Practicing, Ethan repeated, the word rolling slowly off his tongue. You dance? Sofia hesitated, her lips parting slightly before she spoke again. Yes, she admitted at last, her accent curling softly around the word, unmistakably European. I used to, a long time ago. Ethan caught that accent now, sharper than before. He'd heard it before, in snippets, the way she said certain words in the kitchen or when calling Aidan for dinner, but tonight it sounded clearer, like a piece of her she had let slip without meaning to. Before he could press further, Aidan tugged on his sleeve. Dad, look what I can do now. The boy darted back to the middle of the floor, stood a little straighter, and attempted a turn. It was clumsy, but earnest, and Aidan's face glowed with pride. You're getting good at this, Ethan said softly, crouching slightly to meet Aidan's excitement. You'll have to teach me sometime. Aidan's grin widened. Sofia says dancing is like talking without words. She says every step means something. Ethan's brows lifted slightly as his gaze flicked to Sofia. She was staring at the floor now, her hands clasped tighter, as if she wished the conversation would end. The music ended, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than before. For a moment, only the sound of Aidan catching his breath filled the room. You're very good with him, Ethan said finally, his voice softer, less guarded now. I haven't seen him smile like this in months. Sofia glanced up at him then, and in that brief moment, Ethan saw something flicker in her eyes, something unspoken. Gratitude, sadness, a history he couldn't yet guess. Aidan is special, she said quietly. He just needed someone to remind him how to laugh. Ethan nodded, but the weight in his chest deepened. Something about this woman didn't add up. She wasn't just a housekeeper, and whatever secret she was hiding, it was living right here in his home, close to his son. The house settled into its evening rhythms as the last stripe of sunlight slid off the lawn and the recessed lights brightened the hallways with a warm, hotel soft glow. Ethan stood alone in the ballroom for a moment after Aidan bounded upstairs, listening to the echo of his son's laughter fade into the banister rails. The silence that followed was almost theatrical, like the breath a theatre takes before the second act. He moved slowly across the floor where their footprints still ghosted the polished oak, and found himself replaying the sight of Sofia's posture, the alignment, the turn of her wrist, the measured distance of her steps. Not YouTube learned, not casual. That was training, the kind you don't get by accident. The thought lodged like a pebble in his shoe. Why would someone with that kind of refinement be changing sheets in Lake Forest? He left the ballroom and drifted down the corridor toward the kitchen, guided by the murmurs of running water and the faint aroma of chamomile tea. Sofia stood at the sink, sleeves rolled, rinsing a delicate china teacup that didn't belong to the everyday set. It was one of Claire's favorites, with a thin gold rim and tiny blue cornflowers. Her movements were careful, almost reverent, as if she knew the story behind the porcelain without ever being told. Thank you for teaching Aidan, Ethan said, voice even. She didn't flinch, but her shoulders made the slightest square, and her accent warmed the word, of course, as she set the cup gently in the rack. The dish rack, he noticed, was arranged by size and material. A small orchestra of order, crystal to the left, ceramic center, stainless to the right. People revealed themselves in the way they arranged the world, he thought. Hers was a world of precision. Do you give lessons? He asked, letting the question dangle between casual curiosity and a subtle probe. I mean, beyond Aidan. The kitchen hummed around them, the fridge motor, the low tick of the vintage wall clock. the faint rattle of an evening wind against the window screens. Sofia dried her hands on a linen towel and smiled, the kind of reserved smile that closes more doors than it opens. "I don't, Mr. Hale. Not anymore." The anymore hung like a chandelier crystal catching light. "Right," he said, nodding as though that resolved something. It didn't. "Call me Ethan," he added, and for a moment their eyes met. He saw composure there, but also a practiced restraint, like someone who'd stood behind velvet ropes most of her life. Aidan barreled in for a glass of water, chattering about a science video he wanted to show Sofia after homework. "Hey, champ, teeth first, then video," Ethan said, ruffling his hair. "Yes, sir," Aidan saluted playfully and clomped down the hall. Ethan watched Sofia watch the boy go. A softness crossed her face, so unguarded that he felt like he'd intruded on a private note in a diary. "He's doing better," Ethan said quietly. "Sleeping more. Fewer nightmares." Sofia's reply was barely above a whisper. "Grief doesn't vanish. It just learns to sit in a different chair." The line was so precise it startled him. That wasn't a housekeeper's adage. That was something a therapist or a poet or someone who had bled and bandaged their own heart would say. Later, when the house exhaled into nighttime and Aidan's door clicked shut, Ethan found Martha in the butler's pantry updating the inventory spreadsheet by hand, because she still mistrusted the cloud. Martha had been with the Hales for 12 years, part house manager, part sentinel, part aunt who actually runs everything. Her silver hair was twisted into its usual low bun, and reading glasses perched on the tip of her nose. "You're back early?" she said without looking up, then glanced and did a small double-take. "And with that face? Either the market tanked or you found Aidan doing something dangerous that made you proud." Ethan smirked despite himself. "The latter. He was dancing with Sofia." Martha's pen stopped mid-stroke. "Dancing?" She tasted the word as if sampling a sauce. "A waltz," Ethan added. "A real one." Martha set the pen down and folded her hands, a quiet metronome of concern ticking behind her eyes. "She's careful," Martha said at last. "Does everything like there's a correct way and a wrong way, and she's memorized the manual." Ethan leaned on the doorframe, lowering his voice. "What do we actually know about her?" The question wasn't accusatory, not yet. It was the calibrated tone of a man who's negotiated enough contracts to feel the weight of invisible clauses. Martha didn't bristle. She had wondered, too. She came with a local reference, decent, shows up early, leaves late, never lets the laundry sit in the machine, irons the cuffs properly. Claire would have approved. A beat passed. The name, a small stone dropped in a still pool. "But," Ethan prompted gently. Martha sighed. "But she's not ordinary help. The way she places the crystal, how she dusts the paintings. She knows frames, doesn't clean past gilding, uses a goat hair brush on the carved bits. That's training, not YouTube." "Languages?" Ethan asked. "Heard anything?" Martha's eyes flicked toward the closed kitchen, then back. "Once, on the back patio, she took a call. Italian, I think. Could have been Spanish, but it had that—" She searched for the word with her fingers, that roundness, like vowels rolling marbles. Ethan exhaled slowly. "And her hands," he said, surprising himself at the detail he'd catalogued. "No calluses, nails short, not salon-polished, a pianist's hands or a dancer's." Martha gave him a look half amused, half approving. "You notice more than you admit, Mr. Hale." He shrugged. "Boardrooms teach you to read what isn't said." A silence stitched itself between them, comfortable as an old sweater. Then Martha, almost reluctant, "She paid a month up front when I hired her. Said it was important to show commitment." Ethan straightened. "Paid in cash," Martha said. "Crisp bills. I logged it." People pay deposits for beach houses, he thought, not for jobs cleaning them. The pebble in his shoe pressed harder. That night, Ethan opened the small safe behind a framed sailboat print in his office and pulled out Claire's leather notebook, the one she used for little household notes that somehow became a family record. He flipped to the back where Martha stapled hiring forms, receipts, the odd post-it. There it was, a neat copy of Sofia's ID, Illinois address listed as a short-term rental in Evanston. Emergency contact left blank. Employment gap of nearly a year. Relocated as explanation. The cash deposit receipt, properly initialed by Martha. He traced the letters of the last name, Benedetti, and felt something like déjà vu, a museum placard half-remembered from a trip to New York. Benedetti. Where had he seen it? He closed his eyes and could almost smell varnish and old stone, hear the murmur of guides in soft, Euro-accented English. It was nothing he could prove, only the silhouette of a thought. He typed her name into a private browser, then stopped. This wasn't a merger. This was a person living under his roof who had brought sunlight back to his son's face. He scrubbed a hand over his jaw and stared at the screen's waiting blink. With a small, decisive motion, he closed the laptop and reached for a different tool, the one that had saved him more than once. Conversation. Not interrogation. Not yet. He rehearsed lines in his head the way he sometimes rehearsed pitches on the drive down Lake Shore. Neutral questions, invitations more than demands. He'd ask about the music first, safe ground. People reveal themselves when they talk about what they love. On his way to bed, he paused outside Aiden's door and listened to the soft rustle of sheets and the faint, contented sigh of a child, fully asleep. He remembered a time, not so long ago, when nights were fractured into alarms. Aiden calling out for Claire, the way the house felt too big and too empty at once. The waltz had done something that no therapist or basketball camp had managed. It had given the boy a way to step without stumbling through his grief. Gratitude washed through Ethan like warmth after winter. It complicated everything and clarified it too. He needed answers, yes, but not at the cost of the fragile bridge Sofia had built between Aiden's pain and possibility. Just before midnight, as the house settled into its gentle nocturne, the hydronic heat ticking in the baseboards, the oak branches scratching a soft signature along the second-story windows, Ethan stood at the kitchen sink and filled a glass with water. The moon hung clean and white above the dark lawn. In the reflection on the window, he noticed movement. Sofia, passing quietly down the back hallway with a small book in her hands. She didn't see him. She slipped into the library, a room most staff avoided because of its alarms and oil paintings. He waited, counting heartbeats. 5 minutes, 10. Curiosity outpaced etiquette. He padded barefoot down the hall and paused at the library door, left slightly open, the way a careful person leaves no fingerprints. Inside, Sofia stood before the shelf of European art history, her fingertips hovering just above the spines without touching, reading titles like Old Friends, Bernini, Sculpting in Clay, Florentine Palazzi, The Language of Gesture. Her lips moved with a line of text she could have recited. She wasn't stealing, she was remembering. Ethan withdrew soundlessly. The image burned into his mind. A housekeeper who handled gilding like a conservator, who waltzed like a debut at the winter ball, who read art history standing in the dark, who made his son laugh again. The next step was clear and impossible at once. He would need to ask, he would need to listen, and he would need to decide whether the truth he uncovered, whatever it was, would be something he could live with under this roof. He killed the kitchen light, and the house went dark, a stage awaiting morning. Tomorrow, he told himself, he'd begin with, "Tell me about the music." The words felt like a key turning, unlocking a door he couldn't yet see. Morning sunlight spilled across the ballroom like champagne, warm and golden, making the floor shine as though it had been polished overnight. Ethan stood in the doorway, one shoulder leaned against the frame, unnoticed for now. Aidan was already in position at the center of the room, his small feet placed carefully where Sofia had directed him. She stood beside him, poised like a ballerina at rest, her hand on her hip and her posture so perfectly aligned it could have been drawn with a ruler. "Good, shoulders back," she instructed gently, tapping Aidan's shoulder blades with the lightest pressure. "The dance starts before the first step. It starts here." She placed her palm lightly against her own sternum, just above the heart. "This is where confidence lives." Ethan felt something shift in him at those words. He had given Aidan lectures about posture, about eye contact, about looking confident in front of the world, but never like this, never with such quiet elegance. Sofia's tone was not commanding but inviting, as if she were letting Aidan borrow her strength until he could find his own. The music began, Strauss this time, lively but still formal. Aidan took his first step, hesitated, and nearly stumbled. "Stop," Sofia said, not unkindly. She crouched so she was eye level with him. "Close your eyes. Listen." Aidan did, his face scrunching in concentration. "The music will tell you when to move. It's like hearing a secret. You must wait for the music to invite you." Ethan realized his breath had slowed, unconsciously matching the rhythm of the waltz. He could see the transformation happening in his son. Aidan's usual restless fidgeting softened, his shoulders dropped into place, and when he stepped forward again, it was smoother. "Better," Sofia praised, her smile genuine and warm now. "Again." Aidan tried the turn 3 times before he got it right, and when he did, he beamed so brightly Ethan felt it in his chest. He started to clap softly, making them both turn toward him. Sofia straightened instantly, her expression shifting back into that professional neutrality she wore like armor. "I didn't mean to interrupt," Ethan said, stepping inside with a half smile. "But that looked good." Aidan ran to him, practically glowing. "Dad, did you see?" "I didn't mess up this time." Ethan crouched and nodded. "I did. You were amazing." Then he looked up at Sofia. "You're a good teacher." Something flickered in her eyes. Pride, maybe, or nostalgia, before she masked it with a polite nod. "He learns quickly," she said, her voice a touch more formal than it had been a moment ago. "Where did you learn to dance like that?" Ethan asked, his tone carefully casual. He didn't miss the way her hands stilled at her sides before she answered. "I studied when I was younger," she said simply. "It was part of my education." "Education," Ethan repeated softly. That single word held multitudes. This wasn't a woman who had taken community-center dance lessons on Saturday afternoons. This was someone trained, polished, perhaps even bred for this kind of refinement. Aidan, oblivious to the subtle tension, tugged Sofia's sleeve. "Show Dad the bow again." Sofia hesitated just a fraction of a second, then complied, demonstrating a deep, elegant curtsy, her head bowing gracefully. Ethan felt an odd chill run down his spine, as though he were watching not just a dance instructor, but someone from another world entirely, a world of old money, of chandeliers and marble floors. The music ended, leaving the room in a hush so profound that even the ticking of the clock sounded louder. Ethan looked at Sofia, and for one long, silent moment, she looked back. The mask slipped, just for a breath. He saw sadness there, an ocean's worth, before she turned away to gather the speaker and reset the room. Ethan's suspicion had turned into certainty. Sofia was not who she seemed, and whatever secret she was carrying, it was beginning to seep through the cracks. That evening, after Aidan had gone to bed and the house had sunk into its quiet nighttime heartbeat, Ethan found Sofia in the library. She was standing near the Globe bar, her fingers hovering over the spines of a row of leather-bound books on European history. The lamplight cast her shadow against the shelves, elongating her figure until it looked like a portrait from another century. "Sofia," Ethan said softly from the doorway. She startled slightly, but didn't spin around. "Mr. Hale," she said formally, straightening as though caught doing something she shouldn't. "You don't have to stop," Ethan said, stepping inside. "This room was meant to be used." He moved closer, his shoes silent on the Persian rug. "I wanted to thank you for today." She turned then, her expression softening. "Aiden is a remarkable boy," she said, her voice quieter, more intimate now that they were alone. "He just needs someone to believe in him." Ethan nodded but didn't look away. "You're more than someone who believes in him. You're teaching him things that matter. Posture, confidence, grace." He let the words hang for a moment. Those aren't things most housekeepers know how to teach. Sofia's hands tightened slightly around the back of the chair she was standing behind. "I had a different upbringing," she said carefully. Each word weighed before she let it fall into the air. "That much is obvious." Ethan's voice was calm, almost gentle, but there was a firmness beneath it. "You speak like someone who went to finishing school. You dance like you were trained by a master. You know the difference between a Baroque frame and a Rococo one," Martha told me. "That's not an ordinary resume, Sofia." Her eyes lifted to meet his, and for a moment they were unguarded, dark, reflective pools filled with something unspoken. Then she looked away. "With respect, Mr. Hale, everyone has a past. Mine just isn't relevant to the work I do here. But it might be relevant to my son," Ethan countered, his voice still low but edged now with a father's protectiveness. "He adores you. He looks at you like—" He stopped, suddenly aware of how true the words were. "Like your family." The words seemed to strike something inside her. Her jaw tightened, but her voice softened. "Aiden is special," she said again, this time with a thread of emotion she couldn't quite hide. "He reminds me of someone I used to know." Ethan waited, hoping she'd continue, but the silence stretched long between them, broken only by the soft ticking of the mantel clock. "Someone you lost?" he asked gently. For a moment he thought she might answer. Her throat worked as if swallowing back words, and her eyes glistened in the lamplight. But then she straightened her spine, the mask sliding back into place. "It's late," she said, her voice clipped now, professional once more. "I should finish closing the kitchen." "Sofia." His voice stopped her at the doorway. She turned, her hand resting on the frame. "If there's something I should know, something that could affect Aiden, you need to tell me." Her lips parted, and for a second Ethan could see the battle raging behind her calm exterior. Then she shook her head. "Nothing about me will hurt him," she said simply. "That is the only promise I can make." And with that she was gone, leaving Ethan alone with more questions than answers. He sank into the leather chair, staring at the empty doorway, feeling as though he had just witnessed someone standing on the edge of a cliff. Someone who had no intention of letting anyone see how far the drop really was. Sleep did not come easily that night. Ethan lay awake in the master bedroom, staring at the ceiling where the moonlight traced faint silver lines through the skylight. The house was still, but his mind was anything but. Every scene of the day replayed in fragments. Sofia guiding Aiden's shoulders into place, her curtsy that belonged on a stage under chandeliers, her voice when she said, "He reminds me of someone I used to know." It should have comforted him that she swore nothing about her would harm Aiden, but instead it gnawed at him. People don't say things like that unless they have something to hide. His business instincts kicked in, the ones that had saved him in hostile takeovers and billion-dollar negotiations. Verify, trust, but verify. He turned on his side, glancing at the empty pillow beside him, Claire's pillow, and wondered what she would have said. Claire had always had a knack for reading people, for sensing who could be trusted. "Would you tell me I'm overreacting?" he asked her silently. "Or would you tell me to protect our son, no matter what it takes?" By morning, His indecision had hardened into resolve. Over black coffee at the kitchen island, he stared at Sofia as she moved quietly around the kitchen, packing Aiden's lunchbox with neat care. Every gesture was precise, the apple sliced into perfect wedges, the sandwich cut diagonally, just as Aiden liked it. She looked like someone who belonged there, but Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that she was living on borrowed time, that this was a picture-perfect scene painted over a canvas of secrets. When Aiden bounded into the room with his backpack, Ethan's heart squeezed at how happy his son looked. He hadn't seen that light in Aiden's eyes in months, not since Claire's passing. He kissed the top of Aiden's head and sent him off to school, then waited until the door closed behind him before pulling his phone from his pocket. Scrolling past dozens of contacts, he stopped on one name, Jack Monroe. Jack was a private investigator Ethan had worked with during a messy merger 2 years ago, the kind of man who could find skeletons even if they were buried in another country. Ethan hesitated, thumb hovering over the call button. This wasn't corporate due diligence. This was a woman who had been kind to his son, who had brought joy back into a house that had forgotten the sound of laughter. But joy built on lies was fragile, and Ethan couldn't risk Aiden's heart being broken again. He pressed the call button. "Ethan," Jack's voice came through after the first ring, calm and gravelly, like the man himself. "It's been a while. What can I do for you?" "I need a background check," Ethan said, his voice clipped, professional, the way he sounded when he wanted results fast. Discreet, thorough, no paper trail. "Who's the subject?" Jack asked, and Ethan hesitated just long enough for the PI to catch it. "Personal." "Yes," Ethan said finally. "Her name is Sofia Benedetti." He spelled it out carefully. "She works for me, lives on the property." Jack whistled softly on the other end. "You think she's a problem?" "I think," Ethan said, glancing through the window at Sofia, now hanging fresh laundry on the backyard line, her hair catching the morning sun, "that I don't know anything about her, and I can't afford not to know." Jack promised to start immediately, and they hung up. Ethan slipped the phone back into his pocket, a wave of conflicted relief and guilt washing over him. That evening, as he sat on the porch with a glass of bourbon, he watched Sofia walk across the lawn with Aiden, both of them laughing about something he couldn't hear from where he sat. The sound was light and pure, and it cut through him like a blade. He told himself he was doing the right thing. He told himself that protecting Aiden came first. But deep down, Ethan knew that once he learned the truth about Sofia, there would be no going back. For her, for him, or for the fragile peace of the Hale household. The first call came 3 days later, just as the late afternoon sky turned the color of pewter and the first drops of rain began to tap against the tall windows of Ethan's office. He'd been reviewing a stack of acquisition reports, though he hadn't really absorbed a word of them. When Jack Monroe's name lit up the phone screen, his pulse quickened in a way it hadn't since the days of high-stakes negotiations on Wall Street. "Talk to me," Ethan said as soon as he answered. Jack's voice was low, measured, the way it always was when he had something serious to deliver. "I've been digging. Your Ms. Benedetti is very clean on paper, too clean actually. No debt, no arrests, no medical issues that I can find. But there's a gap. 9 months missing from any employment or residence records, and her social security number. It was issued just under 3 years ago. For an adult woman, that's unusual." Ethan swiveled in his chair to face the rain-slicked window, watching droplets race each other down the glass. "So she's not who she says she is." "I'm not saying that. Not yet," Jack replied. "I'm saying she doesn't want to be found, which means there's a story there." He paused, then added, "I pulled some passport data through contacts. There's no record of her entering the country under that name before the SSN was issued. If she came here before that, she did it under a different identity." Ethan's grip on the phone tightened. He thought of Sofia's careful movements, the way she spoke about the past, like someone avoiding broken glass. "Keep going," he said quietly. "Working on it. I also found something that might interest you. The surname Benedetti is Old European, Italian, connected to a noble family with holdings in Florence, Siena, and even New York real estate from decades ago. I don't have a confirmed tie yet, but the coincidence is interesting." Ethan leaned back, the leather creaking beneath him. The room suddenly felt smaller, like the air had thickened. Noble family. That explained the dance, the language, the art knowledge. It painted a picture he hadn't dared to imagine, that Sofia wasn't just someone with a cultured past, she was someone who had run away from an entirely different world. As if on cue, Sofia passed by the office doorway, carrying a folded stack of Aiden's laundry. She glanced in, offered a polite nod, and continued down the hall. Ethan's eyes followed her until she disappeared, and for a moment, guilt pricked at him like a thorn. She'd done nothing wrong that he could prove, yet here he was, prying open her past like a locked chest. That night, after Aiden had gone to bed, Ethan poured himself a drink and called Jack back. "What do you think she's hiding?" he asked, his voice barely above the sound of the ice melting in his glass. Jack's sigh crackled through the receiver. "People hide things for two reasons, shame or survival. If I had to bet, this feels like survival. I've seen women scrub their identities clean to get away from bad marriages, bad deals, bad men. And if she went to the trouble of becoming invisible, she's either running from something or someone." Ethan's jaw clenched. The idea that there could be someone out there with a claim on Sofia, someone who might come looking, sent a ripple of protectiveness through him that surprised even himself. When he hung up, he didn't go straight to bed. Instead, he wandered through the quiet house, ending up outside Aiden's room. He listened to the soft, even breathing of his son and thought about what would happen if the peaceful life they'd rebuilt was shattered again. Downstairs, the ballroom was dark, but he could still hear in memory the faint echo of the waltz that had started all of this. And for the first time, Ethan realized that finding the truth about Sofia might not just protect his son. It might also put all of them in danger. The house was quiet, wrapped in the soft stillness of late night. But Ethan's mind was a storm. He sat alone in the study, a single lamp casting a golden pool of light over the mahogany desk. The bourbon glass in front of him had long gone warm, forgotten as he scrolled through the notes Jack had sent earlier that evening. The words swam before his eyes: noble lineage, no official entry record, possible alias. Each line felt like another thread unraveling the neat fabric of the life he thought he had built since Claire's death. He leaned back in the leather chair and closed his eyes. His thoughts kept circling back to Aiden, his laughter in the ballroom, the way he had started talking more at dinner again, his new confidence. All of that had Sofia's fingerprints on it. She had stitched light back into a house that had been dark for too long. And yet, there was that gnawing thought that wouldn't leave him alone. What happens when the truth catches up with her? For the first time, Ethan considered what it would mean if Sofia's past wasn't just complicated, but dangerous. What if someone came looking for her? Someone who didn't care about collateral damage. The image of Aiden's face, clouded by grief again, of losing another person he loved, twisted something deep in Ethan's chest. He had sworn to protect his son from ever feeling that kind of loss again, and now the question loomed larger than ever. Was Sofia a blessing in their lives, or a ticking time bomb? He pushed away from the desk and walked to the window. Outside, the lawn was bathed in moonlight, silvering the grass and casting long shadows of the oak trees. Through the faint glow from the guest house window, he could see Sofia's silhouette moving inside, maybe tidying, maybe reading. She looked peaceful, almost fragile, and that made his chest ache even more. You should just ask her. A voice in his mind said, sit her down and demand the truth. But another voice, quieter, more cautious, reminded him that trust, once broken, might never be repaired. What if confronting her drove her away? Aidan would never forgive him if Sofia left. He thought of Claire again, how she used to tell him that truth was a double-edged sword. Sometimes, she had once said, people carry their own prisons. If you force them to unlock the door, you might not like what comes out. The words haunted him now. Was he ready for what he might learn? Was he prepared for the possibility that Sofia's life before Lake Forest was a storm that could sweep them all away? He poured himself another drink and stood there for a long time, staring out at the moonlit yard until the glass was empty and the decision crystallized in him like ice. He couldn't sit still anymore. Whatever Sofia was running from, he needed to know, not just for his sake, but for Aidan's. Tomorrow, he decided, he would stop circling the truth. Tomorrow, he would look Sofia in the eye and demand answers. The storm broke just before midnight, lightning flashing against the tall windows and illuminating the grand hallway in stark silver bursts. Ethan found Sofia in the kitchen, rinsing the last of the dinner plates, her hair loose for once, falling in soft waves around her face. The domestic calm of the moment made the tension in his chest feel even sharper. "Sofia," he said, and his voice came out lower, rougher than he intended. She looked up, startled, her hands stilling in the sink. "Mr. Hale," she said, formal as always, but there was an alertness in her eyes now, as though she could sense this wasn't a casual conversation. "Sit down," Ethan said, nodding toward the breakfast nook. It wasn't a request. She hesitated, then dried her hands on a towel and crossed the room with quiet, measured steps. She sat across from him, back straight, her hands clasped together on the table. Ethan took the seat opposite her, feeling the weight of everything unsaid hanging between them. "You've been good for Aidan," Ethan began, his voice steady but cold around the edges. "Better than I ever expected anyone could be after Claire died." Sofia's gaze softened for a fraction of a second at the mention of Claire, but she said nothing. "But," Ethan continued, leaning forward, "I can't ignore what I've been seeing. You know things, do things that don't make sense for someone with your background. Your accent isn't local, your records are spotless, too spotless, and there are 9 months of your life that just don't exist on paper." Sofia's breath caught almost imperceptibly. "You had someone look into me," she said, her tone calm, but her fingers tightened around each other in her lap. "Yes," Ethan said simply, "because I need to know who's living under my roof, who's teaching my son, who he's coming to love like family." For the first time since he'd known her, something in Sofia's carefully composed mask cracked. Her eyes glistened as if she were fighting something back. "And what if I told you that who I was before doesn't matter?" she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It matters to me," Ethan replied, his voice hardening, "because if that past comes knocking on our door, it's Aidan who will pay the price. I won't let him get hurt again, so, Sofia..." He leaned closer, his gaze unflinching. "Who are you really?" The silence stretched so long that Ethan could hear the rain pounding against the windows, the distant rumble of thunder rolling like a drum. Finally, Sofia's lips parted. "I was someone else once," she said, her voice breaking on the word someone. "Someone who lived in a world that was all rules and expectations and golden cages. And I couldn't breathe there anymore." Ethan's chest tightened. "So you ran?" "Yes," she admitted, her hands unclasping now, trembling slightly. "I ran. I left everything behind, and I will never go back." "Why?" Ethan pressed, his voice soft now, almost coaxing. Sofia looked away, blinking rapidly. "Because if I went back, I wouldn't survive, not as myself." For a long moment, neither of them moved. The storm outside cracked open with another flash of lightning, throwing both of their faces into stark relief. Ethan saw fear there, but also defiance, the look of someone who had chosen freedom no matter the cost. "You're safe here," Ethan said finally, his voice low but resolute. "But I need you to understand something. If whatever you're running from comes anywhere near my son, I will do whatever it takes to protect him, even if that means sending you away." Sofia flinched as though struck, then nodded once. "I would never let harm come to Aiden," she said quietly. He is the reason I stayed." Ethan's throat tightened at that, but he said nothing more. He stood, leaving her sitting at the table, her shoulders slightly hunched as if the confrontation had drained something from her. As he walked away, he wasn't sure if he felt relief for finally getting a glimpse of the truth, or fear that the truth was far more dangerous than he'd imagined. The next morning, the house felt unnaturally quiet, as if the storm had taken all the noise with it when it passed. Ethan found Sofia in the ballroom, standing by the tall windows, staring out at the sunlit garden. Her posture was rigid, but her face was unreadable, serene, yet shadowed. "We can't keep circling this," Ethan said from the doorway. "You said you ran. You said you left everything behind. I need to know what that means." Sofia didn't turn around right away. Her fingers rested lightly against the window frame, and for a moment she looked like a portrait, frozen in time, her silhouette rimmed by light. Then she drew a slow breath and faced him. "You deserve the truth," she said finally, her voice calm, but carrying a weight that made Ethan's pulse quicken. "But once you hear it, you can't unhear it, and you may wish you hadn't asked." "I'll take that risk," Ethan replied. Sofia crossed the room and sat on the edge of the grand piano bench, her hands clasped in her lap. "My name is not just Sofia Benedetti," she began. "It's Contessa Sofia Benedetti. I was born in Florence, Italy, to one of the oldest noble families still recognized in Europe. My father is Count Alessandro Benedetti, owner of centuries-old estates in Tuscany, vineyards, and a shipping empire that stretches across Europe." Ethan's eyebrows rose slightly, but he stayed silent, letting her speak. "I grew up in palaces," she continued, her eyes distant, as though she could still see the high ceilings and hear the echo of marble halls. "I attended private schools in Switzerland, studied history of art at Oxford. My life was planned before I could even choose my favorite color. Every step, every smile, every word was measured. And when I turned 24, they decided my marriage would be measured too." "Arranged marriage," Ethan said quietly, the puzzle pieces clicking into place. Sofia nodded. "To Vittorio Castellani, a man nearly 20 years older than me, with more power than conscience. It wasn't a proposal, it was a business deal. My father said it would unite two dynasties and protect our family's wealth." She laughed softly, bitterly, as if I were just another piece of property to be traded. Ethan's jaw tightened. "And you said no. For a year I fought them," she said, her voice cracking. "I begged, I negotiated, I threatened to give up my inheritance. But when they realized I wouldn't comply, they began to take everything away. Friends were told not to speak to me. My cards were cut off, my phone monitored. They even tried to declare me unstable so they could have me committed until I came to my senses." The last words were barely a whisper, and Ethan felt something twist hard in his chest. "So you ran," he said gently. "Yes," she admitted, tears filling her eyes now. "The night before they were going to have me taken to a clinic, I left with nothing but a small suitcase and the documents a friend helped me forge. I crossed 3 countries before landing in New York under a new identity. And eventually, I came here, to Illinois, far enough away that no one would think to look for me." For a long moment, the room was silent, except for the faint ticking of the clock on the mantel. "Do they know where you are?" Ethan asked finally. "Not yet," Sofia said, her voice quiet but firm. "But they're looking. The Benedetti name carries weight. They have the money and the connections to keep searching until they find me." "And Vittorio?" Ethan's voice sharpened at the name. "He won't stop until I am back in Florence, on his arm. To him, my refusal was a humiliation, and men like him, they don't forgive humiliation." Ethan exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. The pieces fit now. The elegance, the languages, the sadness in her eyes. But it also meant that everything he had feared was true. Sofia's past wasn't just complicated, it was dangerous. "Why didn't you tell me this from the beginning?" he asked, his voice softer now. "Because," Sofia said, standing now, her shoulders squared with quiet dignity, "I wanted at least one place in the world where I could just be Sofia, not a contessa, not a pawn, not a runaway scandal. Just Sofia." And then there was Aiden. Her voice broke, tears spilling now. "He reminded me of my younger brother, Matteo. He died in a car crash when he was 12. I couldn't save him. But with Aiden," she pressed a hand to her chest, "with Aiden, I could give that love a second life." Ethan's throat tightened, and for a moment neither of them spoke. The air between them felt charged, as if the confession itself had shifted the gravity in the room. "You're not alone anymore," Ethan said finally, his voice low but resolute. "Whatever this is, we face it together, and I promise you, no one is taking you back there against your will." Sofia looked at him, searching his face for any sign of pity or judgment. Finding none, she nodded once, a single tear sliding down her cheek. For the first time since arriving at the Hale estate, she felt seen, not just as the housekeeper, not just as the fugitive, but as herself. The first sign came a week later. It was a Friday afternoon, and the air in Lake Forest carried the scent of cut grass and approaching summer rain. Ethan was on a call in his home office when Helena, the long-time housekeeper who had been with the family since Aiden was born, knocked urgently on the door. "Sir," she said, her face pale, "there are 2 men at the gate asking questions about Sofia." Ethan's stomach dropped. "What kind of questions?" "They have photographs," Helena said, wringing her hands. "One old, one recent. They say they're investigators working on behalf of her family in Italy. They're offering money for information." Ethan felt his pulse quicken, a mix of adrenaline and anger. He ended the call abruptly and strode to the security monitors. 2 men in dark suits stood just outside the wrought-iron gate, their posture too straight, too professional. Not the kind of people who go door to door without a purpose. "Don't let them in," Ethan said sharply. "Tell them you've never seen her. Say it convincingly." Helena nodded and hurried away, her usually calm demeanor replaced with anxious energy. Ethan picked up his phone and dialed Sofia's number with fingers that suddenly felt heavy. She answered on the second ring. "Ethan? Is something wrong?" "Don't come back to the house yet," he said, his voice low and urgent. "There are men here asking about you. Stay where you are, somewhere public. I'll call when it's safe." There was a pause on the line, and when Sofia spoke again, her voice was steadier than he expected. "They've found me." "Not yet," Ethan said quickly, "but they will if we're not careful." He watched from the upstairs window as Helena walked to the gate and spoke to the men. Even from a distance, Ethan could see the way one of them scanned the house behind her, as though memorizing every detail. After a few tense minutes, they handed Helena a card and left. But Ethan knew this wasn't over. When Sofia returned later that evening, they met in the library with the door closed. The storm that had been brewing since her confession now felt like it was finally breaking. "They won't stop," Sofia said, pacing in front of the fireplace. Her voice was calm, but carried an edge of steel. "If they're here, it means they've narrowed it down. Vittorio will send more men, more persistent ones." Ethan leaned against the desk, watching her. "Then we make it harder for them. I can increase security, add cameras, even hire private protection if we need to." Sofia shook her head. Ethan, you don't understand. Vittorio doesn't send amateurs. If he wants me back badly enough, he'll do whatever it takes. He'll use intimidation, leverage, maybe even the law. He could claim I'm mentally unwell, convince a court to extradite me back to Italy as protective custody. He's done it before to others who opposed him. Ethan's hands curled into fists. The idea of anyone dragging Sofia away, of anyone taking her from Aiden, sent a wave of fury through him. "Over my dead body," he said quietly. Their eyes met, the weight of the moment settling between them. For the first time, Sofia didn't just look scared, she looked ready to fight. "We can't just wait for him to come to the door," she said. "We need a plan, not just to hide, to survive." Ethan nodded slowly, feeling the decision solidify inside him like steel. This was no longer just about uncovering the past. This was about protecting the future, his, Aiden's, and now Sofia's too. The next morning dawned grey and cold, the kind of Chicago spring day that felt more like late winter. Ethan was already awake when the sun came up, seated at the kitchen table with a laptop open, his jaw set in determination. He had spent half the night making calls, reaching out to contacts he hadn't spoken to since his corporate days, men and women who specialized in security, crisis management, and keeping high-profile clients safe from scandal and danger alike. When Sofia entered the kitchen, still in her robe, she paused at the sight of him. "You didn't sleep," she said softly. "No," Ethan admitted, closing the laptop. "And I'm done waiting for Vittorio to make the next move. I'm putting a team together, security professionals, people I trust. They'll monitor the property, screen visitors, make sure Aiden gets to and from school safely. If these men come back, they won't get within 100 feet of you." Sofia walked to the coffee pot, poured herself a cup with hands that trembled just slightly. "You don't have to do this," she said after a long pause. "This isn't your fight." Ethan stood and crossed the room, his voice low but steady. "The moment you stepped into this house and made my son smile again, it became my fight. You're not doing this alone anymore." Something flickered in Sofia's expression, relief, maybe even gratitude, but there was still fear there too. "Protection can only do so much," she said. "Vittorio doesn't just have money. He has influence, judges, lawyers, even embassy connections. If he really wants to force me back—" "Then we get ahead of him," Ethan interrupted gently. "I've already called an attorney I trust. We're going to explore every legal angle, restraining orders, immigration protections, anything that keeps you safe here. If this becomes a battle in court, we'll be ready." Sofia sank into a chair, holding the coffee mug like an anchor. "Do you have any idea what it feels like," she said, her voice breaking, "to wake up every day wondering if today's the day they find you? To never let yourself get too comfortable, too attached, because you know it could all be ripped away." Ethan sat across from her, his gaze unwavering. "Yes," he said quietly. "After Claire died, every day felt like I was waiting for the next blow, the next tragedy, the next thing to take what little I had left. That's why I know we can't live like that forever. Fear doesn't get to run this house anymore." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The kitchen was quiet, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of Aiden's footsteps upstairs. Then, slowly, Sofia reached across the table and placed her hand over Ethan's. "You don't know what this means to me," she said, her eyes shimmering. Ethan squeezed her hand gently. "Then show me," he said softly. "Show me that you trust me enough to fight for more than just survival. Fight for a life. Here. With us." The intimacy of the moment hung in the air, charged but fragile. When Aiden bounded into the kitchen a minute later, the two adults separated their hands, but something unspoken remained between them, a silent pact. Later that afternoon, a black SUV rolled up the driveway, carrying the first members of Ethan's security team. Watching them unload equipment and set up monitoring systems gave him a strange sense of calm, like putting on armor before going into battle. That night, for the first time since the men had appeared at the gate, Ethan slept without waking. And in the guest house, Sofia lay awake staring at the ceiling, not from fear this time, but from the strange, dizzying thought that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't running alone anymore. 3 days later, the rain returned, falling in relentless sheets that blurred the windows and turned the driveway into a dark mirror. Ethan was reviewing security footage in his study when one of the guards knocked sharply on the door. "Sir, we have movement at the gate again. Same car as last time. 2 men inside." Ethan's pulse spiked. He followed the guard to the monitor room, where the live feed showed a sleek black sedan idling just beyond the wrought-iron gates. 2 figures sat inside, their faces obscured by the rain, but the posture was unmistakable, waiting, watching. "They've been sitting there for 10 minutes, the guard said. "No attempt to approach the house this time." Ethan stared at the screen, jaw tight. "They're testing us," he said grimly, "seeing how we respond. Log the footage and double the perimeter checks tonight." When he stepped back into the main house, he found Sofia standing in the hallway, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. She had seen his expression and knew. "They're here again," she said, not asking but stating. "Yes," Ethan admitted, "but they're not getting past the gate. Not while I'm here." Her breath hitched, and she turned away, pacing toward the window. "Do you know what this feels like?" she said suddenly, her voice sharper than usual, "knowing that at any moment everything could be taken away, that they could drag me back across an ocean against my will, that Aiden could watch me disappear one morning and never see me again." Ethan moved closer, his own frustration boiling over. "Do you know what I feel every time I see my son smile at you? Every time I watch him get a little piece of his childhood back? I can't lose that, Sofia. I can't lose you, not now." The words hung in the air like a live wire. Sofia froze, her back to him, and for a moment the only sound was the rain beating against the windows. Then she turned slowly, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "You can't say things like that," she whispered. "Not when I don't know how long I can stay. Not when every day feels borrowed." Ethan stepped closer, close enough now to see the fear and longing warring in her gaze. "Then stop borrowing," he said softly. "Start living here, with us, for as long as you can. Stop carrying this alone." Sofia's composure cracked then, tears spilling freely as she sank onto the nearest chair. "I'm so tired," she admitted, her voice breaking. "So tired of running, of hiding, of pretending I don't care when every night I pray that tomorrow won't be the day they find me." Ethan crouched in front of her, taking her hands gently but firmly in his. "Then let me fight for you," he said. "Let me take some of that weight off your shoulders. You don't have to be alone in this anymore." For a long, charged moment, they stayed like that, hands clasped, faces inches apart, breathing in sync. The tension between them wasn't just fear anymore. It was something else, something raw and magnetic that neither dared name out loud. When Aiden's footsteps echoed down the hall a moment later, they broke apart, but the air between them felt different now, as if a new line had been crossed. Sofia wiped her tears quickly, forcing a small smile for Aiden as he came running in with a school project to show her. But when her eyes met Ethan's over the boy's head, there was no mistaking it. They were no longer just protector and protected. They were allies, partners, something more. That night, as the storm finally quieted outside, Ethan stood by his bedroom window, staring into the darkness. For the first time since Claire's death, he realized he wasn't just protecting his son's happiness. He was protecting his own heart, too. It was just past midnight when the alarm went off. The sharp electronic wail shattered the stillness of the house, sending Aidan's dog into a barking frenzy. Ethan was out of bed in an instant, his bare feet hitting the cold hardwood floor as he grabbed the security tablet from his nightstand. The screen lit up with a flashing alert: perimeter breach, North Gate. Ethan's heart thudded hard against his ribs as he bolted from the room, shouting for the nearest guard. Within seconds, 2 men from the security team met him in the hallway, armed and alert. "North Gate," Ethan ordered, his voice low but urgent. "Show me the feed." They hurried to the security room, the house lights still flashing red. The live footage came up on the main monitor, 2 shadowy figures moving quickly near the gate, one of them already halfway up the fence. "They're coming in," one of the guards said, his voice tight. "Stop them," Ethan growled. Within minutes, floodlights snapped on, bathing the property in harsh white light. The intruders froze like animals caught in a trap before dropping back down and sprinting toward the road. One of the guards took off after them, but returned 5 minutes later, breathless. "They were fast, sir, knew exactly where to run. They had a car waiting down the road, gone before we could get a plate." Ethan's jaw clenched. This wasn't random. They were probing the estate's defenses, testing how quickly the response would come. By the time he made it back to the main hall, Sofia was there, barefoot, her hair loose, wearing a thin silk robe that made her look impossibly fragile against the backdrop of blaring alarms. "What happened?" she asked, her voice shaking. "Someone tried to come over the gate," Ethan said, forcing his tone to stay calm for her sake. "They're gone now. No one was hurt." But Sofia's face drained of color. She wrapped her arms around herself and took a step back as though the walls themselves had closed in. "They're here," she whispered, "not just watching anymore. They're coming for me." Ethan crossed the room and put his hands on her shoulders. "Not on my watch," he said firmly. "They'll have to go through me first." Sofia met his gaze, her fear warring with something else. Trust. "Ethan, if they keep pushing, they won't stop until they get what they want. Maybe the only way to keep Aidan safe is if I go." "No." The word came out like a growl. "That's exactly what they want, and I won't let them take you, or scare you out of the life you've built here." Aidan appeared on the stairs then, clutching his blanket, his wide eyes scanning the flashing lights. "Dad, what's going on?" Ethan knelt at the bottom of the stairs and opened his arms. "Just a false alarm, buddy," he said gently, even though they both knew it wasn't entirely true. "Go back to bed. Everything's fine." Aidan hesitated, then nodded slowly and trudged back upstairs. When he was gone, Ethan turned back to Sofia. "This ends now," he said. "No more waiting for them to make the next move. We take control." Sofia swallowed hard, then nodded, her fear solidifying into something sharper: determination. That night, after the alarms were reset and the guards resumed patrol, Ethan and Sofia sat at the kitchen table with the security chief, sketching out a new plan: reinforced barriers, emergency evacuation routes, and a protocol for Aidan's school pickups. When Sofia finally returned to her room, she stood for a long moment in front of the mirror. The woman staring back at her no longer looked like just a housekeeper. She looked like someone preparing for war. The house had finally gone quiet again. The floodlights were off, the guards had returned to their posts, and Aidan was asleep upstairs, clutching his stuffed bear as though it could keep the night's shadows away. But Ethan couldn't sleep. He sat alone in the library, a glass of bourbon untouched on the table beside him. The fire had burned low, casting flickering shadows that made the room feel more like a battlefield than a sanctuary. When Sofia appeared in the doorway, she was barefoot, her robe tied loosely at the waist. She looked exhausted, but her eyes were steady. "You're still awake," she said softly. "So are you," Ethan replied without looking up. She stepped inside, her feet silent on the thick rug, and sat across from him. For a moment neither spoke, the silence filled only by the faint hiss of the fire. "I've been thinking," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe this is the moment I stop running. Maybe I should just turn myself in, go back, face them, end this for good." Ethan's head snapped up, his eyes blazing. "No," he said, the word hard and immediate. Sofia flinched at the force in his voice but didn't look away. "You saw what happened tonight. They won't stop, Ethan. And if they keep coming, it's only a matter of time before Aiden gets caught in the middle. I can't let that happen." "You think sacrificing yourself will protect him?" Ethan leaned forward, his voice low but fierce. "You think giving Vittorio what he wants will make him stop? That man doesn't just want you back, he wants to own you, and once you're back in his world, do you really think they'll let you go again?" Sofia's breath caught. She looked down at her hands, her knuckles white. "I'm so tired," she admitted. "Every night I lie awake, wondering if tomorrow will be the day it all ends. I can't keep living like this, waiting for the knock on the door." Ethan stood and crossed to her side of the room. He knelt in front of her, forcing her to meet his gaze. "Then stop waiting," he said. "Stop living like you're just a fugitive counting the days. Stay, fight with me." Her eyes widened slightly, his words sinking in. "You make it sound so easy," she said, a sad smile tugging at her lips. "It's not easy," Ethan said quietly, "but nothing worth fighting forever is. Sofia." He hesitated, then reached out and took her hands in his. "Since Claire died, I haven't let anyone this close. Not to me, not to Aiden, but you're here now, and you've changed this house. You've changed us. I can't lose that." "I won't lose you." Sofia blinked back tears, her chest rising and falling as though she couldn't quite catch her breath. "You don't know what you're saying," she whispered. "I know exactly what I'm saying," Ethan replied. "You're not just someone I'm protecting anymore. You're part of this family, and if I have to go to war to keep you here, I will." For a long moment, she just stared at him, her hands still in his, the firelight painting both their faces in gold. Slowly, she nodded. "Then we fight," she said softly. "But if we do this, we do it together. No more secrets." Ethan's grip on her hands tightened. "Together," he promised. They stayed there for a moment longer, just looking at each other, before Sofia leaned back, exhaling shakily. The tension between them was electric now, not just fear, but something far deeper. That night, when Sofia finally returned to her room, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. For the first time, the idea of a future here didn't feel impossible. And Ethan, still sitting by the fire long after she left, felt a decision solidify inside him. If they were going to fight, they needed more than walls and guards. They needed something that would make it harder for anyone, even Vittorio, to claim Sofia didn't belong here. The morning after their late-night conversation was quiet, almost unnaturally so. The house smelled of freshly brewed coffee and rain-soaked earth drifting in through the open kitchen windows. Ethan stood by the counter, still in his t-shirt and jeans, a folder of legal documents spread before him. When Sofia entered, her hair still damp from a shower, she noticed the intensity in his posture before she even saw the papers. "What is all this?" she asked cautiously, moving closer. Ethan looked up, his jaw set, eyes clear. "Options," he said simply. "Options." He gestured for her to sit, then slid the folder toward her. "I spoke with my attorney this morning. There are ways we can make it harder, much harder, for Vittorio or anyone else to take you from here. Legal avenues, not just private security. But they all depend on one thing." Sofia's brow furrowed as she glanced through the papers, immigration filings, residency applications, a phrase that made her heart skip, spousal sponsorship. She looked up at him sharply. "Ethan!" He took a slow breath, then said it plainly. "Marry me!" The room seemed to go utterly still. Even the quiet hum of the refrigerator faded, leaving only the sound of Sofia's breath catching. "Marry you," she repeated, as though she needed to make sure she had heard correctly. Yes. He didn't flinch, didn't back down. Not because I expect anything from you, not because I need a wife, but because it's the only way I know to make sure you're protected, legally, permanently. If you're my wife, you can't be forced out of this country. And if Vittorio tries to challenge it, we fight him together. Sofia stood abruptly, backing away a step as though the idea itself was too big to hold. Ethan, do you have any idea what you're saying? Marriage isn't just a legal contract. It's a shield, Ethan interrupted gently but firmly. One that makes it harder for anyone to take you, one that tells Aiden, and the whole damn world, that you belong here with us. Her throat worked as she tried to speak, but no words came. She turned away, staring out the window at the rain-speckled glass. You don't understand, she whispered. If we do this, there's no going back. This isn't just about me anymore. It ties you to all of it. The Benedetti family, Vittorio, the mess I left behind. They'll see it as a declaration of war. Ethan came to stand behind her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. Then let it be war, he said quietly, because I'd rather fight beside you than watch you be dragged away without a chance to fight at all. Sofia turned then, and for the first time, tears spilled freely down her cheeks without her trying to hide them. Do you even realize what you're offering me? She asked. Yes, Ethan said. I'm offering you a way to stop running, a way to give Aiden and you a life that isn't built on fear. I'm offering you a choice. For a long moment, they just stood there, the air charged between them. Finally, Sofia exhaled shakily, wiping her cheeks. If we do this, she said slowly, then it has to be clear. This is about protection, nothing else. No expectations beyond that. Ethan nodded once. Understood. And Aiden can't know the real reason. To him, it has to feel real, like we chose this because we wanted to be a family. Ethan's mouth softened into something that was almost a smile. Then let's make it real enough that even we believe it. Sofia gave a small, incredulous laugh through her tears. You're insane, she whispered. Probably, Ethan agreed. But I'm not wrong. By the time the conversation ended, Sofia's hands were trembling as she signed the first of the documents that would set the process in motion. Ethan placed his hand over hers to steady it. Whatever comes next, he said quietly, we face it together. And for the first time since she had run from Italy, Sofia allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she had finally found a place where she could stop running. The wedding took place 3 days later, under a pale morning sky that hinted at spring, but still carried the chill of winter. Ethan had arranged everything quickly but tastefully, a small private ceremony in the rose garden behind the house. No reporters, no extended family, just Helena as witness, a local judge, Ethan, Sofia, and Aiden standing between them, practically buzzing with excitement. Sofia wore a simple ivory dress that Helena had helped her find at a boutique downtown. It wasn't extravagant, just soft satin that caught the light when she moved. But it made her look ethereal. Ethan stood tall in a tailored navy suit, his expression calm but his chest tight with something he couldn't quite name. When the judge asked if they wished to exchange vows, Ethan spoke first. I promise to protect this family, he said, his voice steady. To stand between you and anything that tries to harm you. To give Aiden the stability he deserves. Sofia's throat tightened as she looked at him, feeling the weight of every word. And I promise, she said softly, to do everything in my power to keep this home filled with light, no matter what comes. To care for Aiden as if he were my own. And to face whatever storms may come, together. Aiden grinned from ear to ear as the judge pronounced them husband and wife. Does this mean I can call her Mom now? he blurted, earning a soft laugh from both adults. Sofia knelt and hugged him tight, whispering, "If that's what you want, then yes, forever." After the ceremony, they had breakfast together on the back patio. The sunlight broke through the clouds just enough to warm the table as Aidan excitedly talked about all the things they could do now as a real family. Sofia smiled and nodded, but every so often she glanced at the new wedding band on her finger, almost as if to remind herself this was real. That night, after Aidan went to bed, Ethan found Sofia standing in the doorway of the ballroom, the very room where he had first caught her dancing with Aidan. The moonlight spilled through the tall windows, catching in her hair. "This feels unreal," she admitted quietly. "I spent so many months convincing myself I didn't deserve something like this, that I didn't deserve a family." "You do," Ethan said simply, stepping closer. "You've earned every bit of peace we can give you." Sofia turned to face him, her expression softer than he had ever seen it. "You keep saying this is about protection, about safety," she said, her voice low. "But today, when we said those vows, it felt like more than that." Ethan's breath caught because he had felt it too, the moment when practicality blurred into something real. Before either of them could say anything more, a guard's voice crackled through the intercom. "Sir, we've received word. The black sedan from before was spotted again, but this time it wasn't alone. 2 vehicles. They stayed just long enough to be noticed, then left." Sofia's face paled, but Ethan touched her arm gently. "Let them watch," he said. "This house isn't the same house they approached before. Neither are we." She nodded slowly, the fear in her eyes tempered now by something stronger: resolve. That night, for the first time since arriving in America, Sofia slept without waking from a nightmare. 2 days after the ceremony, the air felt heavier around the estate, as if the house itself knew something was coming. Ethan was in his study going through emails when one of the security guards appeared at the door, his expression grim. "Sir, this was delivered to the front gate about 20 minutes ago." He handed Ethan a thick, cream-colored envelope, sealed with a red wax insignia. The crest pressed into the wax was unfamiliar, but its formality sent a chill down Ethan's spine. Inside was a single sheet of stationery, the handwriting elegant but sharp. "Mr. Hale, your hasty marriage does not change what was promised. Sofia Benedetti belongs to her family, and to me. Return her willingly, or I will come to claim her myself. V.C." Ethan's hand tightened around the page until the edges crumpled. The use of Sofia's full name, her real name, made his blood run cold. They weren't just guessing anymore. They knew. He found Sofia in the garden, kneeling among the rose bushes as she trimmed away dead blooms. She looked peaceful, almost happy, until she saw Ethan's face. "What happened?" she asked immediately, rising to her feet. He handed her the letter. Her fingers trembled as she unfolded it, and when she finished reading, her face went pale as porcelain. "He knows," she whispered. "He knows we're married." "Yes," Ethan said grimly, "and he wants you back, now more than ever." Sofia's breath came faster, her pulse hammering in her throat. "Ethan, this is it. This is the part where he stops playing games." "Then let him come," Ethan said, his voice like iron. "We're ready for him." "Are we?" Sofia asked, her voice breaking. "Because if he comes here, he won't come alone. He'll have men, lawyers, money, influence. He'll do whatever it takes to win." Ethan stepped closer, cupping her face in his hands. "Then we fight smarter. We make this as public as we have to. We make it clear that taking you won't just be a family matter, it'll be a scandal. Vittorio thrives in the shadows. Let's drag him into the light." Sofia stared at him, stunned by his intensity. "You'd go that far?" "I'd go farther," Ethan said quietly. "Because he's not just coming for you anymore. He's coming for my wife." That night, they reinforced the house's security, doubled the guard shifts, and installed additional cameras. Every creak in the hallway, every car passing on the road outside made Sofia tense. When she finally lay down in bed, she turned to Ethan in the darkness. "What if this is the night he comes?" she asked softly. "Then this is the night we stop running," Ethan said, his hand finding hers under the covers. "One way or another." Sofia closed her eyes, her heart pounding, knowing that the battle she had been dreading was no longer somewhere far away. It was on their doorstep, and as the wind howled outside and the first drops of rain began to patter against the windows, it felt like the world itself was bracing for impact. Topic 19. The Arrival. The day Vittorio arrived, the sky over New York was a hard, cold grey, as though even the weather knew trouble was coming. Ethan was on a business call when Helena's urgent voice cut through the intercom. "Mr. Hale, you need to come to the gate, now." Ethan's gut clenched as he strode to the security room. On the monitors, a black convoy of luxury SUVs had stopped just outside the estate gates. The lead vehicle's window rolled down, and a sharply dressed man leaned out, speaking calmly to the guard, his expression one of complete confidence. It was Vittorio Castellani. Even through the camera feed, his presence was unmistakable. Expensive charcoal-grey suit, slicked-back hair, and the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. This was a man who had crossed an ocean not just to talk, but to take. "Open the gate," Ethan ordered. "Sir?" the guard asked, startled. "Open it," Ethan repeated, his jaw set. "If he's come all this way, we're going to meet him face to face." Moments later, Vittorio's convoy rolled into the driveway, the rumble of the engine sounding like an invading army. When the vehicle stopped, 6 men in dark suits stepped out first. Private security, their movements crisp and rehearsed. Finally, Vittorio emerged from the lead car, buttoning his jacket as he looked around the property with cool appraisal, like a man examining merchandise. Ethan met him halfway down the front steps, shoulders squared. "You're trespassing," he said flatly. Vittorio's smile widened, predatory and calm. "I prefer to think of it as visiting family," he replied in perfect, lightly accented English. "There is no family here for you," Ethan said coldly. "Sofia is my wife. She's not going anywhere." At the sound of her name, Sofia appeared in the doorway behind Ethan. She was pale but composed, dressed simply in a soft grey sweater and jeans, her eyes locked with Vittorio's, and for a fraction of a second something unreadable passed between them. History, anger, defiance. "Cara mia," Vittorio said smoothly, ignoring Ethan entirely. "You've kept us all waiting far too long. The time for rebellion is over. It's time to come home." "I am home," Sofia said, her voice steady even as her hands trembled at her sides. Vittorio chuckled softly, a sound that made Ethan's skin crawl. "You think this place, this country, can protect you from who you are, from who we are? You are a Benedetti. You belong to us." "She belongs to no one," Ethan said, stepping closer until he was inches from Vittorio. "And if you think you can walk onto my property and intimidate her, you've chosen the wrong man to play with." Vittorio's smile vanished, replaced by a thin, sharp line. "Careful, Mr. Hale," he said quietly. "This isn't a battle you can win with money and pride. I have more resources, more connections, and more patience than you can imagine. Sooner or later, she will come with me. The only question is how much damage is done first." "You want to test me?" Ethan said, his voice low and dangerous. "Go ahead, but understand this. If you try to take her, you won't just have a scandal on your hands. You'll have a federal case. And I will drag your name and your family's name through every court in this country until there's nothing left for you to hide behind." For a moment, the two men just stared at each other, the tension between them so thick it felt like the air might shatter. Finally, Vittorio gave a small nod to his men, who began retreating toward the cars. "This is not over," he said, his voice soft but lethal. "Next time, I won't come to talk." He turned back to Sofia one last time. Think carefully, cara mia. How many lives are you willing to destroy before you admit where you belong? Then he was gone, the convoy disappearing down the drive as quickly as it had come. When the last car was out of sight, Sofia let out a shuddering breath and collapsed onto the steps, her whole body shaking. Ethan knelt beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "He's not taking you," Ethan said firmly, his voice steady even though his pulse was still thundering. "Not now. Not ever." But as he held her close, watching the road where Vittorio's convoy had vanished, Ethan knew the man had been telling the truth about one thing. This wasn't over. It had only just begun. It happened 3 nights later. The house was quiet, the guards at their usual posts, when the first alarm blared through the security system. Red lights flashed in the hallways, and Ethan was out of bed in an instant, pulling on his shirt as Sofia bolted upright beside him. "What is it?" she whispered, her voice tight. "Perimeter breach," Ethan said grimly, grabbing the handgun he kept in the drawer. They hurried down the stairs, and before they even reached the front hall, the headlights of several vehicles cut across the lawn. This time, there was no slow approach, no pretense of civility. Vittorio's men were pouring out of the SUVs like a well-trained strike team. "Stay behind me," Ethan ordered, as the guards took their positions. The front doors shook as someone pounded on them. Then Vittorio's voice rang out, sharp and commanding. "Ethan, you've had your chance. Bring Sofia out now, or we come in and take her." Sofia's entire body went cold, but Ethan's hand found hers, grounding her. "You're not going anywhere," he said, his voice low and firm. The standoff lasted only seconds before the first window shattered. Gas canisters clattered onto the marble floor, hissing as white smoke filled the entryway. "Move!" Ethan shouted, pulling Sofia back toward the interior of the house. The security team engaged, shouts and gunfire tearing through the night. Aiden appeared at the top of the stairs, terrified. "Dad! Go to the safe room!" Ethan bellowed. "Now!" Sofia sprinted up to grab him, holding him close as they raced down the hallway toward the reinforced door hidden behind the library shelves. Ethan followed, covering them until the last guard signaled that the breach was contained, for now. Inside the safe room, Aiden was shaking, tears streaming down his face. "They're going to take her, aren't they?" he cried. "No," Ethan said, kneeling in front of him. "No one is taking her. Not while I'm breathing." The intercom crackled. Vittorio's voice came through, chillingly calm despite the chaos. "You can't hide forever, Hale. The world knows she's mine. This ends tonight." Ethan grabbed the microphone and snarled into it. "No, Vittorio, tonight is when it ends for you." Then, turning to Sofia, he said, "We make this public right now." "What?" she asked, stunned. He grabbed his phone, opening the live stream app connected to his verified business account. "You wanted to fight in the light. Let's give him nowhere to hide." Seconds later, Ethan Hale, billionaire, philanthropist, and a man whose followers numbered in the millions, was broadcasting live from inside the safe room. He spoke clearly, his voice ringing with controlled fury. "This is Ethan Hale. My wifey Sofia is being targeted tonight by an international figure attempting to abduct her from U.S. soil. If anything happens to her or to my son, the man responsible is Vittorio Castellani." Outside, there was a sudden silence. Vittorio hadn't expected this. The entire world was watching now. Sofia stepped into frame beside Ethan, her chin lifted proudly. "I am Sofia Benedetti Hale," she said, her voice steady. "I left Italy because I refused to be forced into a marriage I did not consent to. Tonight, that man came here to drag me back against my will. I will never return. This is my home. This is my family." The comments on the live stream exploded, journalists tagging networks, legal experts chiming in, the story going viral in real time. Vittorio's men began to retreat, their element of control shattered. The front gate swung open as the SUVs peeled away into the night, leaving only the sound of sirens approaching in the distance. When the police arrived minutes later, Ethan provided them with the recording, ensuring there was no way Vittorio could spin the narrative in his favor. Back in the safe room, Ethan finally let out the breath he'd been holding. Sofia collapsed against him, shaking, but this time it wasn't fear. It was relief. "You did it," she whispered. "You made sure they can't touch us again." Ethan kissed the top of her head, his arms tight around her. "No, Sofia, we did it." Aidan crawled into her lap, still sniffling, and she held him close. For the first time, she didn't feel like a fugitive. She felt like someone who had taken back her life. Outside, dawn was breaking, painting the horizon in pale gold. A new day and a new life had begun. The days following the confrontation felt like stepping into a new world. The estate, once tense with fear, now carried a strange stillness, the kind that follows a storm when the air smells of wet earth and possibility. News outlets had picked up Ethan's livestream within hours, turning Vittorio Castellani's failed abduction into an international scandal. By the next morning, his reputation was in free fall. Legal authorities in both the US and Italy announced investigations into his conduct. For the first time, Sofia felt like the hunter had become the hunted. One afternoon, she stood by the wide kitchen windows, sunlight catching the gold wedding band on her finger. It still felt strange, but no longer as a symbol of necessity. It had become something else, a promise she wanted to keep. Aidan burst into the room, waving a drawing he had made. "Look, Mom," he said brightly. Sofia froze for a moment at the word Mom. Then her eyes softened. She crouched down and took the drawing from him, the three of them, standing hand in front of the house, a bright sun overhead. "It's beautiful," she said, pulling him into a hug. "You even drew the rose garden." "That's where you got married," he said proudly. "It's where everything got better." Later that night, Ethan found Sofia in the ballroom, the room where everything had started. This time there was no music playing, just the sound of their quiet breathing as they stood facing each other. "You know," Ethan said softly, "when I asked you to marry me, I told you it didn't have to be real, but it became real for me a long time ago." Sofia's throat tightened. "Me too," she admitted. "I spent so long running from who I was, from what I felt I had to be. But now, for the first time, I want to run towards something, toward you, toward Aidan, toward this life." Ethan stepped closer, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Then stop running," he said. "Stay, not because it keeps you safe, but because you want to." Sofia smiled, tears filling her eyes. "I'm not going anywhere." He pulled her into his arms, holding her as if he never planned to let go. Weeks later, the ballroom was filled with music again, not tense, not secretive, but joyful. Sofia taught Aidan a new dance, while Ethan watched from the doorway, smiling. When Aidan twirled too fast and nearly fell, Sofia caught him, and the room rang with laughter. As the music swelled, Ethan joined them, taking Sofia's hand and spinning her once, just enough to make her laugh. For the first time in a long time, the house felt whole. And as the sun set over the Hudson River outside, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, Sofia thought of the girl she had been, the one who had fled across the ocean, terrified and alone. That girl was gone. In her place stood Sofia Hale, wife, mother, survivor, and finally free. Sometimes the most powerful battles we fight aren't with fists or lawyers, but with the courage to stand firm in who we are, even when the world tries to rewrite our story. Ethan, Sofia, and Aidan didn't just survive Vittorio's threats. They transformed fear into strength, turned a marriage of convenience into a bond of love, and proved that a family isn't defined by blood, but by the choice to stand together when it matters most. And now, I want to hear from you. What moment in this story hit you the hardest? Was it when Ethan faced Vittorio at the gates? When Sofia finally said she was home? Or when Aidan called her mom for the first time? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Your perspective might inspire someone else who's watching this right now. And if this story moved you even a little, don't just leave quietly. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and share this video with someone who needs to remember that love and courage can change everything.